All right. Before we get into the actual septic stuff, I wanted to do a brief summary. You should have all received information from MLS, but every July 1, there's some changes. We actually got away pretty easy this time. It wasn't that many changes, but a couple things I wanted you to be aware of. So your coming soon addendum, that can now be 45 days. That's an increase from 21. So use that tool as you typically do if you're trying to, I have sellers that need a deadline, like they keep, I'm getting the house ready, I'm getting the house ready. Get them on paper and you got 45 days to get the house ready. I believe if it's incoming soon currently and isn't set to go active, you can expand it. It's like, well, I know you can because my seller did not get their house ready this week like they thought, so we've expanded it a little bit. So if it hasn't expired, you can expand it up to the 45 days. All right. Purchase agreement. The resale certificate, so your HOA packages. They've changed the right of rescission or cancellation for the buyer. They've changed that time period again. I think last year they actually passed that they could waive it. I think we saw some people waiving it. Now, at least per our contract, they have to put in at least 1 day. But the big change is it's not the automatic 3 days. So that's kind of helpful. You got a hot listing. You don't want to worry about being tied up for 3 days. You can shorten it to 1. That is negotiable, of course. So, and it can be any number of days. So the big change is it's not set to automatically 3. If you forget to fill in the blank, because there's 2 places to fill in the blank. If you fill in 1, it auto-populates to the other, so you're covered, all right? It will default to 3 days if you have not filled anything in. They just clarified some payment information. Let's say you've had a package that needs updating, like the whole package needs updating, or somebody, one side of the deal requests an update. The person requesting the update pays that fee. Now, if it's just the financial update required by the closing attorneys, that gets all the numbers straight, those fees are the responsibility of the seller, like they've always been. Any questions on that? All right, and then the big change that we're going to talk about more, they really didn't change much in the contract, but the way we are going to practice and execute it is going to be affected, is on the septic. Let me see, did I do? Yeah, I broke these up separately. So it's actually true for well and septic and termite, which we'll talk about in a minute. They now can be done 90 days prior to settlement instead of 30. So that's good. If you've got a listing that maybe you're worried you're going to have some problems and you want to get ahead of things, you can order them early as long as you're pretty confident it's going to close within that 90-day period. I've talked to lenders. They're okay with that as well. The ones that are affected, the deals that are affected, doesn't matter when the contract was ratified. If the inspection, which now obviously it's a moot point, but if the inspection was after July 1, the new rules are in effect. And the main new rule is they have now said if an inspection is going to be done, if the contract calls for it, it has to be this full detailed inspection. You cannot negotiate it to just doing the visual inspection and the rod probing. So it's, just be careful of your wording, because some buyers may not care. If they want to totally waive it, that's fine. They can do that. But if they ask for an inspection, the seller needs to know the inspector is required by their standards and guidelines to now do the full-blown thing. And in most cases, they're going to require a pumping even if it was just pumped. Okay, so all this just kind of affects the dollars out of whoever's pocket's paying for the inspection, which in our contract, it's typically the seller, but it can be negotiated to whoever's paying for it. But that's kind of the biggest change is you can't just say, I'm going to look at this or this, and we're going to get into it later, all the requirements of what they have to look at. So the pumping is now included as a part of the inspection. And then going on to termite, the big thing there is it's now good for 90 days as well, as I just mentioned. The other thing, y'all all know that paragraph 24H refers to F and G. It's the amount of damages or remedies that the seller's gonna have to cover. The default amount of our contract, if you do not fill it in, is now $2,500. It used to be $1,000. You can still negotiate any amount there that the seller is agreeing upfront at the time of the contract. If you need a handout, Logan has a few more. Yeah, so now that default is $2,500 up from $1,000. You can still negotiate whatever. Yes, oh, you looking for a packet? Okay. And they did just clarify the cost of the inspection is not a part of that $2,500. So those are two separate buckets. If the contract says the seller is going to pay for the inspection, regardless what that ends up costing, that's one bucket. Then if repairs are needed or any type of correction, the seller is committed to up to $2,500. And I guess, like I said, it's all negotiable. You can put zero. Like if the buyer says, I'm good, I'm not going to, you're trying to make their offer more competitive, I'm not going to ask the seller to address these issues, you can put whatever number. But the default is going to be $2,500. And then just an admin change. When you go to pin your transactions in MLS, they've now created a code if you have an unrepresented buyer. And it's that 1111. All right? So that's the overview. I've kind of broken this whole septic thing into kind of different stages, like some procedure changes, things you might want to do up front. I'm going to be honest, I don't know, maybe some of you do, and I want you to share your experiences. I don't know how many of the new inspections have been performed yet, so I don't know about cost. I've talked to some agents who have talked to different vendors. There seems to be a wide range of cost, so just prepare your seller for that. Yes, sir?
Yeah, I mean, that was the question I was gonna ask is like recently I've had two different sellers go out and like basically get quotes from like honestly soil patch that I've been using for years, and I mean they're getting some ridiculous quotes that are very expensive, and then also the timeline seems to be like pretty far out now. So I was curious kind of what those things.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I do want y'all, I want to cover the information, but I do, at the end, maybe we'll share if you've had some experience, if you've got any words of wisdom so that we can do this effectively. I think it's going to be like any change until we get used to it and see what the report looks like when it comes back, because they are going to now give you a report. I think we're just going to have to sort that out as it goes. But you're probably going to need to educate your sellers and set up some expectations. So we're going to talk about that today. All right, preparing your listing for a septic inspection. So I've already mentioned this. If the purchase agreement calls for an inspection, then the law requires a full inspection. No more just the visual or rod probing, but they can choose to waive the inspection. So don't go telling your sellers the law requires an inspection. That is not the case. Some loans may, probably the government loans may, but that may not even necessarily be true. So it's not the law that's requiring an inspection. It just says if you negotiate an inspection, it has to be the full inspection. And then this is the way they define a full inspection. All readily accessible and openable components, such as septic tanks, pump tanks, distribution devices, treatment units, control panels, and dispersal fields. From what I read, because I did have, well, let me back up. I tried to get a septic guy to come in. They're all so busy, I couldn't get anybody that was available on this date. I'm still going to try to do that at a later point if we think that's necessary. But one of them sent me kind of like their association's FAQs like we got from MLS. And from what I read, readily accessible and openable may be subject to interpretation by the inspector. So that's where I'm thinking you might see a differentiation in fees. And they're probably going to be hesitant to quote fees, I would think, until they see the site. That would be my guess. I think we've got included at the end, one of the guys sent me his sample contract. And for the one part of it, it was like a flat fee plus $7 per foot dug or something like. So I have a feeling every vendor is going to have a different way that they break this up and price it. So just be prepared for that. I can't give you all the details, but I just know that's something that's probably going to be subject to interpretation. The inspector will have a written contract with the person ordering and paying for the inspection, which for us is usually the seller. The inspector will need a copy of the septic system operating permit, and then we're going to talk later. There are remedies if the permit is not available. And the inspector will deliver a detailed report within 10 days. So what your takeaway is from there is there's a few more steps involved, so therefore there's more time involved. So set that expectation with your seller and, evaluate the property. If it's something you think is going to sell quickly because they're getting it all shined up and it's going to be ready to go, maybe that's something you want to do ahead of time so you're ahead of the game. If you're thinking your listing is going to be so competitive that maybe a buyer will waive the inspection because the system's not that old, then maybe you wait and see what comes in with your contract. So I think your job is to understand the process, inform your clients and give them their options and tell them, just like we do with everything else, if you do this, this may happen, okay? All right, so that leads into preparing your listing and setting expectations. As always, set the expectations up front. You may need a longer closing date. Everything I've read suggests that. Anyone can order the permit. It's available through the Freedom of Information Act. So this isn't one of those things where you need written permission from the seller to request it. Anybody can request it. So consider ordering it pre-listing so there's no surprises later. This is not a new thing. This has always been the rule, but I guess people have not had as much accountability to it before. Maybe it wasn't a check in MLS because it wasn't a part of the inspection report. But you can only market the number of bedrooms indicated on the permit. Okay? Extra bedrooms should be marketed as an office, bonus room, etc. Nowhere in MLS, even in your remarks, can you suggest the space be used as a bedroom. Now, obviously, your pictures, it's going to look like a bedroom. We all know what a bedroom looks like. Just make sure you've labeled it something else. People are going to see it when they go out. They're going to know it's a bedroom. And every buyer's situation may be different. But just you cannot market as more bedrooms than the permit says. And then also, as we've talked about, prepare your seller. There's going to be the possibility of additional expense, depending on what the inspection entails and that kind of thing. All right, the next slide, I get questions about this almost every day. So I'm going to send this out to everybody, and I want y'all to save it. This is how you order the permit. You order them through the Virginia Department of Health. I've put the link there that you go to. It's pretty self-explanatory. They recommend you provide as much information as you can, including the health district. You find that on the website. There's a map on there where you can put in the address and figure out which health district you're in. Tax ID number, property address. Stoney Marshall sent out an email. I hope y'all saw it. He shared his experience. He had one where he knew, because he'd sold the house and it was new in 2006, so he knew the permit existed, but the response back was, we can't find the permit. So then he requested it a different way and ended up getting it. So we recommend that you use as many of these terms as you can. And when you go on the site, it's just a little box where you type all this stuff in. It's very easy. So you want to request the operation permit and the septic completion statement and the health permit. And hopefully if you use all that different terminology, whatever county you're dealing with, they'll find what you need. Some counties have a nominal fee. I know Hanover's $5. And the really aggravating part is you have to call in to pay the fee. The good news is they sent me the permit, so I've got what I needed. I've called twice and can't ever get anybody to pay. So, but anyway, there is a nominal fee. All right. What to do if the permit isn't available? For marketing purposes, you can go ahead and list the property. You don't have to wait till you get it. And you can use the number of bedrooms listed in the tax record. just be prepared. I mean, kind of educate your seller on all this. We're going to advertise this as a 4-bedroom house. If we get into this and find out that it's a 3-bedroom house, once the inspector has actually done the inspection, then that may be another negotiation with your buyer. We'll talk about that in a little more detail in a few minutes too. So the most important thing, you can list the property. The inspection can still be performed, and the inspector will attempt to determine the capacity of the system. And again, this is one of those things we're going to have to see how each vendor handles it. Some may take on more liability or risk than others and give you something that estimates the capacity. Others may say, I can't figure this out. We're going to have to get a soil guy or some other engineer in here to determine the capacity of the system. And that's where the additional expense would come in. All right, so I'm going to just pause right there. Has anybody had that happen yet, where they've had some experience with this part of the process? No permit available, inspection done, and having to call somebody else in? Nobody's had that yet? Okay, good. You may find it on older properties or in rural counties, I think would be your 2 higher risk categories. All right. Other items to consider. If the number of actual bedrooms is greater than the permit number, and the seller wants to market or the buyer wants to use all of the bedrooms, so you're in a situation where it's a 3-bedroom system, but the seller's like, man, I know my house is a 5-bedroom house and I want it marketed that way, then you may have to take some other steps up front to be able to do that. So if you're already under contract, I would recommend first education and negotiation. A 3-bedroom house is meant for 6 people. So if the buyer is a mom and dad and 2 kids, they're still good, okay? Or even a mom and dad and 3 kids. If they each have their own bedroom, that's still 5 people. So you need to be educated so you can have this information for negotiation, because you don't know if the other agent on the other side, we've all dealt with agents who aren't as knowledgeable and they end up blowing something up because they can't explain it. So just remember that and try that first. And if everybody's in agreement, then nothing else has to be done. Your deal keeps moving forward just like always. If they do want documentation of the number of persons, if the buyer does, the seller can apply. It's called a minor modification permit. I think the fee is $150. And once that's done, it's recorded. So it's tied to the property. So that's kind of a permanent change. The ultimate cost and change is if you've got a seller who says, no, I want this to be marketed as a 5-bedroom house. Well, then, Mr. Seller, we need to get a septic guy out here and see what's needed to expand your system from a 3-bedroom to a 5-bedroom house. And maybe when they hear the cost of that, they'll decide they don't want to do it. I have no idea what those costs might be or what's involved. This is just things I'm putting on your radar to be aware of and to ask questions. Obviously, this is not a topic where you want to over-inform, like you don't want to put all these ideas in their head and say, oh yes, we've got to get your house up to a 5-bedroom system. Just explain the different options. You know, like I said, obviously if somebody's walking through a house and they see 5 bedrooms, they're doing the math in their head too about how many people are going to be in the house. Okay? Yes?
For like kind of like more like the new construction stuff, like for example, like if you're like advertising a home that's like a new floor plan, for example, like for like like a Madison and RCI, right? So if you like advertise that as a Madison, but you're only on like a 3-bedroom septic, and
It's a
you know,
3-bedroom
like,
house.
advertising a 5-bedroom house, you know?
You
So
can't
like,
do
can
that.
you not put that in the remarks if it's like a
Correct. It has to be just a 3-bedroom house. You can talk about flexibility of other rooms, bonus space. Rodney, what do you want to add?
I'm just saying RCI is probably not gonna build a Madison on a 3-bedroom site.
Uh-huh.
They're gonna be specific to build it too.
Well, I mean, I have built some in RCI where they had, you know, some of the bigger plans, but they kind of just renamed one of the feeder rooms, media room, and stuff like that. And I'm just wondering, like, if you do have like a, like maybe probably Charlotte or something, or just more on a 3-bedroom site, and like you can't really advertise it as that floor plan, so I'm asking.
I think they had also done persons per bedroom.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you got 4 bedroom per, you can add 18.
Well, that was gonna be my next question too, though. If you do the limited occupancy permit, and you say, like, let's say it's perks for 3 bedrooms, you get the permit for 6 people, and then you actually, if it's a 5 bedroom house, can you advertise it as 5 bedroom at that point, or no?
No.
Right, you just have to say, hey, it's a 3 bedroom, but you can still do 6 people.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the limited occupancy expires once they sell that house. It's only good for those, for when those people purchase
Yeah,
it.
that doesn't.
I'm not sure about that because, I mean, they say it gets recorded, so I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure. It may not convey.
No, I don't think it expires. I think it runs with the house.
That's what I thought, if it got recorded.
Life of the house.
Yeah, it says right there, recorded with landlord.
And as far as the remarks go,
Unless you change the septic field, you know, you can change the septic.
Right.
But you still always have to say, this is a 3 bedroom perk site, once you know it.
So in addition to new construction, Ian, it's the same kind of thing as far as the inspection goes. I don't know how many buyers of new construction actually do a septic inspection. Probably very few if it's not, but if it's not written in the contract, you don't have to say, Mr. Builder, you have to do a septic inspection, right? It's always only if the contract calls for an inspection that you have to do it. I do know, I've heard agents talk about, they've come across builders who've maybe done a 2-bedroom system. Most folks aren't going to want to advertise a 2-bedroom house when it's a 3 or 4-bedroom house. So you just need to understand and be prepared to address the situations. I can't tell you exactly what the solution is going to be because there's a million scenarios. It's going to depend on the property. It's going to depend on the price point. It's going to depend on what your seller wants to market, all that kind of stuff. Uh-huh.
On a trial level, where you got 3 up and a bedroom down in the bottom on the trial level, would most of those be, would you think most of those would be a 3 bedroom septic, or?
I have no idea. I would think most houses aren't going to be bigger than a 3-bedroom if it's like that. I've got a trial level I'm getting ready to list, so I chose my 3 bedrooms that I'm marketing is the lowest level as a primary, another primary on the 3rd level, a 3rd bedroom on the 2nd level, and then a bonus room. So that's the way I'm marketing my 4 rooms. Okay. I don't know that we're going to know what type of systems you've got until you pull that permit. So Rodney, this is one thing I wanted to ask you. If you read all these things they send out, they talk about check your broker's policy. I think it's a fine policy to start up front. Pre-listing, go ahead and request the permit so you know what you're dealing with. You concur with that? Yeah. It's just like anything else. You want to know what you're walking into. It's going to help you with pricing. It's going to help you with marketing. I always think it's going to be better if you can have your information clear up front than having to make multiple changes throughout the listing process. But you may run into scenarios where it's not available, so you are going in blind. So then you work off the tax records, and then you'll have to attack the issues that come up throughout the process. Okay? Any other questions? That's really it. So like I said, it's not like it's this huge change. It's really going to be the issues that pop up, being aware to expect them, and knowing who to talk to and where to go to solve them. And every situation is going to be different. Yes, Russ?
If the settlement doesn't occur in the 90-day period, what do you do to resolve that? Is there a re-inspection or recertification?
I would assume that the vendors are going to come up with something to address that. I would think they'd come do a recheck, reinspect. I mean, I would think it would be an update just like we do with HOA packages that expire. Hopefully, like I said, you just probably need to get more information from your vendors. I don't know how willing they're going to be to share specifics. I did get one guy, let's see if I can pull it up here. So this is one example, and this is the pricing I was talking about. Like he's got septic conventional, septic alternative, pumping the tank, inspect the box. It says $50 and then $7 per
Inch.
inch of digging. Okay. I think they're going to be more the source on what you do with the report and what they're going to charge. I think he was also, that's a disclaimer, I think, that he's getting people to sign. Yeah. Oh, whether they're wanting it pumped or not. Yep. And that's the other thing, timing wise, it's all got to be done before they go out. And this is the disclaimer. So this particular company, they're saying they're not responsible for damaging, that's probably a common disclaimer, any other stuff. I thought I read somewhere in here, maybe it was in the order, I thought they said they're not going to move anything. Did y'all see that on there somewhere?
Yeah, that's on the second
Yeah.
page.
The customer agrees to have all components readily acceptable. We are not required to move any structures, personal items, furniture, debris, excessive vegetation. So I think it's like anything else. You may have to reevaluate who you're working with, find out who's the easiest to get along with. I haven't done a ton, so I've never had to deal with a lot of this, with dealing with the inspector directly. But I think these are all questions that maybe either you coach your seller when they're getting quotes to ask. Who had a hand up?
I was just thinking, somebody starts coming across somebody very reasonable, will somebody send out that name for everybody to maybe?
Well, sure. I mean, that's like anything. If anybody wants to share, they may want to keep them all to themselves so they don't get booked up. I think the thing, just like with everything, when you're listing a house or when you're writing a contract on your house, the more knowledge you have, the better you can make the deal go smoothly. We were talking yesterday in the Mechanicsville office. If you've got a really old system, it might behoove your seller to go ahead and get this inspection done with up front so they know, hey, you got a system that is not going to pass this inspection report, and get those problems dealt with beforehand. I know typically when I have some sellers ask, should I do like a pre-listing home inspection? I just talk through it with them. Most of the times I'm like, I don't know, you got a hot house that everybody's going to want. Most of the buyers are going to waive inspection, save your money, let's don't do it. Or if you're like, yeah, we got a ton of problems and maybe we want to know what some of the big ones are so that we get those knocked out up front, and it's going to depend on their budget and all of that. So I do think be more aware. If it's an older house with an older system, there is probably the bigger potential for things. Has anybody gotten a report back yet that they can share what it looks like? Because it used to be you just got back, it passed or failed. Now they're going to have some sort of report on all these different components. Yes, Matt?
Yeah, it's, so I've got coming back from CMW, Hanover CMW, and they are multi-page with every system listed, a picture of every system. So a couple pictures of inside the tank, a couple pictures of inside the distribution box, a picture of the drain field, and then they'll describe, not only does it pass, but like CMW is telling you what condition it's in. So it's in good condition, like new, fair, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It's very detailed.
Are they quoting cost to repair like on a home inspection report?
It does. So I've got one on the buyer's side that needs repairs. They had it done by CMW, and they are giving estimated cost to repairs. Yes.
So I would imagine it's going to be just one more negotiation, which, I mean, it always has been. If you got something back that said the system failed, and a lot of times the inspector might say, hey, you need a new distribution box. I think this is just documenting and formalizing it a little more, is my understanding. But it's just going to be something that, again, if the other side is not educated, they're going to see a report that says this, this, and this, and it's just going to be more managing of your clients. I think there's more potential for freakouts, for less of a better word, if they don't know what's going on. All right, anybody got anything else that they've experienced or any questions. I may not have the answer, but maybe the group does.
Well, I do have a question from that. I was just curious now. Did the mortgage company get involved with that at all? Can you say nothing about it, whether?
Hasn't got involved. Well, in the buyer situation, the seller's actually like agreed to take care of it. So it's, hey, it's gonna be fixed. That's all.
Conventional loan, mortgage companies will not get involved.
Yeah, it is a conventional loan. It's a
Yeah. It's probably just the government loans that you'll have an appraiser or the mortgage company say something about it. Rodney, you got anything else?
Nope, excellent job.
All right.
Hey, Cindy, will you shoot out an email to everybody and just say, hey, meeting was good today? Will you throw out your recommendations of your preferred septic inspectors? If it comes from you opposed to somebody random, maybe they'll read it and respond.
Okay. I work with one person, so
Yeah.
I can
But
send
I
that.
mean, you bounce it to the company and see.
And see, oh, you asked the company to send in theirs?
Just use
Gotcha.
names and if they've had experience, was it good, was it bad, how was it priced?
Gotcha. I'll be happy to do that. This has been recorded, so Logan will have that up in a couple days. I'm going to email this. If you didn't get one, I'll email it to everybody. I tried to read through all the different pieces of literature that I had access to and pull out the things that I thought were most important to us. I just think it's going to be good to have a conversation with your vendor, find out how they're doing it. Like I said, we are going to try to get somebody, they just are so busy and so backed up, and with the rain, I think they've had more systems messing up. Yes, Matt?
Hey, sorry, I was gonna recommend to, if you get a report back that a component on septic is failing, get a second opinion like a doctor's note. Like, the price range between one quote that they got and the other quote was literally double, 6,000 and 12,000 for the same repair.
Okay.
So,
I have heard that from other agents, even just on the basic inspection. His seller got quotes that went from 700 up to 1,600. So I think it's going to take a little bit to settle out and see how it actually goes. I think to Sean's point, if anybody has an experience that's good or bad or a warning flags, share that information so we can keep everybody educated and up to the minute. Okay.